Today's episode of Daily Persuasion is sponsored by Bulletproof, the first and only book that tells the whole truth that is known and that which is not known about the attempted assassinations of Donald J. Trump that happened in 2024. Bulletproof. Forward by Donald Trump Jr. himself. Now, that story is an example of the dog that's not barking. This is something that Scott Adams speaks about on a regular basis, and it makes complete sense when you realize what the heck it is that he's talking about. And it's this. Are you listening? Here we go. From The Independent. Trump shooter spotted by officers at least 30 times in 30 minutes before he opened fire. A police sniper reportedly took a picture of 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks before bullets began to fly, but never took a shot at him. I want to read something to you from Bulletproof. Stop the presses. Stop the presses. Dog that's not barking. This is a security failure, isn't it? Security failure. If you read the Independent article, if you read anything else that's written about it. Oh, and by the way, it wasn't 30 minutes. It was more than 90, as many as 100 minutes prior to the shooting. He was known. Wow, why did they take the shot? You know, it's a security failure. It's communication breakdown. Isn't it interesting? Something else that you'll find from official sources and even opinion commentators, influencers, analysts on the Trump shooting in Butler. Something that they miss is Thomas Matthew Crooks' behavior. He was calm, cool, collected, confident, and moving about slowly. He wasn't scuttling. He wasn't hustling. He wasn't trying to hide. He was in broad daylight with his rangefinder, with his rifle. And so we wonder, why? Oh, it's security failures. Oh, it's all security failures. This is what it is. Security failures. A failure of security. Unprecedented security failures. Heads will roll. Someone's getting fired. Really? And yet no one's talking about the behavior of the shooter. No one is calling out the fact that he acted like he was going to be safe. He acted like he was going to be okay. He acted like there was no threat to him personally. That's the dog not barking. That's what I find particularly interesting in all of this. And I want to call that out for you because of what we have here in Bulletproof. We humbly conclude this chapter with more than a legal standard, but with probability. Consider the various security failures that occurred in Butler, Pennsylvania that collectively allowed Thomas Matthew Crooks to seep deep into presidential territory and they get off 8 shots, 8 chances to kill Donald J. Trump. Not 1, 8. Recall that Lee Harvey Oswald needed 3 to murder President John F. Kennedy in broad daylight, and the man and his motorcade were moving. In the review chapter, we've called out 12 security botches that, had any single one of them been handled with professionalism and care, would have prevented the shooting and Corey Compatore would still be alive. And then we lay out all 12 of them, like failure to attend security briefing, inadequate counter-sniper preparedness, drone security refusal, counter-sniper communication failures, inadequate manpower, abandoned overwatch post, failure to secure perimeter in buildings, slow response to Crooks, failure to prevent Crooks from accessing high ground, failure to secure Trump immediately after threat detected, leadership and operational failures, lack of specialized medical support, so on and so forth. What are the odds that all 12 security botches could occur on the very same day that there also happens to be an armed man with malicious intent present amid all 12? If only one of these hadn't occurred, there would have been no shooting as well. Let's think in terms of probability. I want to skip ahead here a little bit. We, as a social experiment, my co-author Jack Posobiec and I, we consulted ChatGPT 4.0 or Omni for helping us calculate the probability of all of this. We're going to calculate the combined probability, we say. If we assume that all 12 failures and the presence of the armed man are independent events, the probability of all 12 failures happening and the armed man being present on the same day is a product of these probabilities, which means we have to multiply all of them by each other. Now we calculate the combined probability that would happen independently with no prior participation, no prior knowledge, no prior planning, no prior intent, all independently of one another by chance. 1 times 10 to the minus 27th. The probability of all 12 security failures taking place independently from one another, yet simultaneously, together with the presence of a capable marksman with intent to kill, is 1 in 1 septillion, or 1 followed by 27 zeros. And that's just 12 of numerous more security botches. And we have already admitted how wildly overestimative we are of these 12 lapses occurring individually and independently. Wow. The odds of flipping a coin and getting heads 93 times consecutively are approximately 1 in 10 septillion. So this is only slightly less likely than 1 in a septillion. We then asked ChatGPT-4 Omni what it thought, and here's what it concluded. This suggests that the occurrence of all these failures and the presence of the shooter is extraordinarily unlikely by chance alone, raising serious questions about whether these events were truly random. Boom. Bulletproof. Never surrender. Okay. So, how come probability was not talked about in the media, in the news? How come no one called out the fact that this guy is acting confident? You remember there was that TikTok leak of Thomas Matthew Crooks walking around the Butler rally not 2 hours before the shooting? Well, my co-author Jack Posobiec looked in the video and saw people who were in the video at the same time, and he went and he asked them, did you talk to him? And there was a booth with an organization Turning Point, formerly Turning Point USA, now Turning Point Action. I attended one of the very first events more than 7 years ago. They've come a long way. It's great. They were even popular then, 2017. Wow. So there was a Turning Point Action booth there at the Butler rally on July 13th. Thomas Matthew Crooks came over, and he was reported as turning up his nose at them, acting like a bit of a snob, cocky, looking down on them, but yet kind of quiet, and acting in such a way as to make them a little bit unsettled, as if he possessed asymmetric information. Now, of course, something like this hasn't happened in our generation, and so they did not immediately think the unthinkable at that point. But that adds up. He is depicted as calm, cool, collected. I went to the site of the Butler rally, number 2. That was there in the front row near Elon Musk. J.D. Vance was there, the Trump family, and of course the Comparatory family. They were right near me. They were having a bad day. They were having a bad day. However, it was special to have a 100,000 person memorial service for Corey, the slain firefighter whom Thomas Matthew Crooks took out. The AGR building from which Thomas Matthew Crooks took shots at Trump is quite close. And it's inside the otherwise obvious, tight security perimeter. Think about that. There's a security perimeter, and Thomas Crooks was deep inside of it. That's not being reported in the media either. Jack Posobiec and I, we hired an investigative team, a private investigation team to track down everyone in his network. We've got the goods. We got the goods. When you go out into the yard and you lift up a rock what happens? Light hits the creepy crawlies, and they go skittering and scattering. Even months later, in the areas of Butler, Pennsylvania and Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, creepy crawlies are still skittering. People are moving around suspiciously. They're acting like light has hit them. Read all about it inside the book. Bulletproof. Order bulletproof.com. Sponsored of today's show, not really, because I'm the author, co-author. So what am I going to do? As you hear stories, as people try to assign you their opinion, you will become more and more adept at this. You'll become skilled at saying, time out. What are you not telling me? And everything I've said for the last 11 minutes and 2 seconds has not been reported by anyone in the news. And yet it kind of should be. Now, you could say that it's narrative. Is it a fact that he was acting in a certain way? Semi-objective, certainly subjective. But a reasonable person would observe Crooks' behavior that day and say, this looks like a man who is executing a plan. He is not appearing nervous. He is not appearing worried that he's about to be caught. Is his behavior in line with a hit on Donald J. Trump? Or is his behavior in line with the official narrative of a troubled youth with no political motive whatsoever being a lone wolf shooter and as part of this plot to take out Trump? Is his behavior more in line with the former or with the latter?